Good evening, good people. We're so glad that you're here with us tonight, and we're going to get started in just a few more moments. Make sure that you have gotten comfortable, you got your water, you got your tea, whatever you need to be here rocking out with us tonight. Go ahead and get comfortable. Make sure you tell a friend that you are on the mass call and invite them to come and join you. We're going to get started here in just a few moments. While we're getting settled, let's just take 1 minute to give some love to the team that makes the calls happen. I do this not just because it's reflexive or symbolic intervention. We do this because they're making sure that we all have access to learn from and with one another and build the power of our people. So I just want to thank On Point, all the tech folks, the comms folks, the design crews, every single organizational partner, and every single one of you for being on the call tonight and making the call possible. Good evening and welcome to this mass call to process elections and our feelings, be reminded of our work in this time, and to learn together. As we've been doing for many months now, this mass call is our chance to take a step back as a movement and examine where we are. We want to look at the current events, but also past the punditry and put this moment in a bigger context, not just for the sake of being smarter people, but for the sake of actually impacting how we do our work and what work we do. So thank you for prioritizing this call tonight. I'll alert your folks real quick, tell them to come on and join us. Today, we're going to be hearing from people on the front lines of our movement about the work that they're doing, and you can do your part as well. So we'll be talking about calls to action throughout the call so that you can be a part of the movement that's making the difference right now. I am Ashley Woodard Henderson, your host for tonight. Welcome to people who haven't been on the calls before. We know there's a bunch of new people, so welcome. We're so excited that you're here, and some of you are like OGs that have not missed a call since April. So for folks that have been here, we see you, we love you, we appreciate you. We're glad that all of you have joined us. If you're watching on the Zoom, please do what we do. Go into the chat, say hello, maybe share where you're calling in from. If you represent an organization that you want to shout out, feel free to do that too. If you're watching on a live stream on social media or on YouTube, y'all feel free to do the same in the comment section. And I'm sending special love to the folks who are watching the recording. Y'all have been using these recordings in political education sessions, so thank you for watching it after we're done with the live. One thing we have to do is be really, really clear on this in this space and everywhere that when we're fighting for justice and liberation, there's always going to be some haters. And the more visible our work is, the more they come after us. It is certainly upsetting, but we're not going to be surprised if there are trolls on with us tonight. If you see any hateful messages in the Zoom chat trying to distract us from the work that we're doing together, I want you to just flood the chat with messages of solidarity, of love, other positive messages. Because remember, we can disagree, we can debate, we can do all of those things without disrespecting each other. And that's our commitment to one another in this space. Let's take a second before we get into the political education and hear from the really incredible speakers that have joined us tonight. Just take a second to get grounded in this moment. The outlines of the coming Trump administration are starting to come into view. With every nomination of an unqualified loyalist, he's sending a very clear signal. We should be prepared for a raw display of power from Donald Trump and these goons that follow him starting on day one. There's so much more to say about every single one of the nominees, but that's another conversation for future calls. Trump is going to come after our people, and he's going to come after our organizations. We know this. We don't have to look far for examples of what they will try to do. Viktor Orban from Hungary is a hero of the American right. Tucker Carlson just interviewed him. The Conservative Political Action Committee, or CPAC, held a conference in Budapest earlier this year, and Orban was a keynote speaker. When he was elected to office, one of the first things that Victor did was try to outlaw civil society organizations. He went after the free press. He went after the judiciary. It's not a question of if Donald Trump will try to do this. There will be those here in the US who will be shocked when Trump and his administration take these same steps. No matter how many times they've seen it before, no matter how outrageous the act, no matter how many times the so-called responsible adults in the room bend to his will, there will be people who clutch their pearls and say, it couldn't happen here. We are not those people. We realize that the sooner we collectively stop acting with surprise to the ways to which Trump and his loyalists intend to wield power, the sooner we can get to working and responding with clarity, with determination, and with organization. The strategy of a wannabe dictator is to flood the zone, to throw so many attacks and so much law breaking in our face all at once that we're unable to keep up, that we spin out, that we fracture from one another. They want an opposition that is off balance. But we see this coming, and we are not that opposition. We'll feel our feelings, but we're going to rely on our community to not become overwhelmed by them. And in showing up in this way, we will provide leadership to others who are looking for hope and who are seeking our grounded leadership to weather this storm. Now, I'm sure you all are asking, how are we going to do this, Ash? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to understanding power. We understand that to change our communities, to change this country, we need to stop wishing that power will just go away, because it won't. The people who hold power over our communities will not voluntarily give it up. We understand and will not be fooled by illusions of power. We're not going to trick ourselves into believing that because we have the truth or good values, the law sometimes, or all the best research and the greatest arguments, because we're really smart, that we are somehow safe. The longer we spend time thinking like that, the longer it's going to take for us to be ready to actually organize. The longer we stay stuck waiting for some referee to step in and blow the whistle to stop the game, the longer it's going to take for us to fight back. In moments like this, it's helpful to remember the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm not talking about the whitewashed version of some guy who had a nice dream one time, y'all. We need to remember the version of MLK that was thrown in jail and whose phones were tapped by the US government. We need to remember the MLK who studied power and talked about power at the Highlander Center. We need to think about the King who was clear that power is neither good or bad on its own. It is simply, and I quote, the ability to achieve purpose. Let me say that again. Power is the ability to achieve purpose. Power is a tool, and we must learn to wield it. But that's not all he said. For King, power was about something quite foreign to our current adversaries. It's about love. He said, and I quote, "One of the greatest problems of history is that the concepts of love and power are usually contrasted as polar opposites. Love is identified with a resignation of power, and power with a denial of love. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Their power is reckless and abusive, good people, but our power cannot be sentimental and anemic." I know that talking about these things, living in these current circumstances, can be heavy stuff. So let's just take a moment to arrive, however you're arriving, whatever you're feeling, whatever is influencing how you're feeling, whether that is the personal, the political, or both. Let's just take a moment to breathe. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouths. Let's do it one more time. Take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. That sense of fear that you feel inside you, or that sense of anger, that sense of wanting to care for and protect those around you, those feelings, and many, many more that you might be feeling, they're real. We should not ignore them. They are a reminder that we are alive and that we are feeling our feelings. We are not numb to this, because only when they have made us completely numb, all of us, will they have won. When we shut down and tune out, when we detach and escape, when we do these things, their power becomes more complete. When we concede, when we hear the censors in our head that tell us we are powerless. Now, taking a minute to care for yourself and others is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about conceding our power and believing the lies of supremacists who socialize us to believe that we have no power. We're never going to let it become complete, because even in our darkest hours, when their power had forced us below deck and underground, when their power put up fences and walls to control us, when their power stole our land and the lives of those we love the most, we never lost our power. Our power was that shining light through the cracks. Our power was that dream of another life, another way to be human together. Our power was the stories and the songs and the jokes that we told, the love we made. Our power was our organizing and winning small battles and then bigger battles. From those glimmers, from that love, we're going to begin building and rebuilding our power, y'all, together, all of us. So there are things that you can do to plug into this collective work to ensure that we control the terrain in which we continue to build our power. If you haven't already done this, if you're new to the mass calls, I want you to take your phone out right now, take it out, go to your text message service and text mass call, MASS, space CALL, like you see on the screen, to 30403 for a list of ways that you can take action. I promise you that it's not benign to send that text because it'll give you the opportunity to RSVP for the rest of the mass calls that we have scheduled from now through January. It'll give you an opportunity to hear the up-to-date calls to action that are coming left and right in this season. It'll give you an opportunity to join organizations like the Working Families Party that are making these calls happen. I also want to remind you, and we're going to make sure that this information gets to the chat nearby, sent out with the recording. It'll be posted on the website, all these things, that you can still join the Working Families Party right now. You can just go to wfpus.org/member and join. You can become a Wolfpack leader or join a Wolfpack near you, and we'll make sure that you get that link. You can access all of the recordings and materials from past mass calls at the website workingfamilies.org/mass calls. I'm going to talk more about that when we get to the political education section. You can share with your friends right now. You could organize your own team of folks to come and be on the mass call. You can encourage them to text mass call to 30403. And I want to remind you from the really big mass call that we had on the 7th, where over 100,000 people came together, that you can sign up to host or attend a We Are Worth Fighting For community gathering. Y'all have already hosted hundreds of them in the last couple of weeks. So you can sign up for hosting one in your community if you haven't seen one yet, or you can just sign up to attend one of the ones that has been already committed to in your community. So we'll make sure that all of those links get to you in the chat. And for folks that are watching on the recording, we'll make sure you've got them in the follow-up email as well. Let me remind you what we're doing here with these mass calls. They're being hosted by the Working Families Party and highlighting WFP member organizations and movement leaders from across the country. As always, we want these calls to be grounding. We want them to provide you with information and strategic orientation from leaders that you can trust, and to give you concrete things that you can do to get off that noisy hamster wheel of information, misinformation, and disinformation that is being thrown at you left and right, and get you back in a position to take action, to build power. If you like what you see here and you want to get plugged in and you want to do more, you can text mass call to 30403. Like I mentioned, we have more mass calls coming up, which you can find on our Mobilize page. We'll make sure that that link gets dropped in the chat. And again, I just want to make sure that you've texted mass call to 30403 so that we can get the back signal to you when it's time to gather again, and make sure that the calls to action are getting to you promptly so that you can be active right now if you are willing and able. Here's what we're going to do on tonight's call. First, as always, we're going to do some political education on our block and build strategy. Then we're going to have a conversation with two incredible leaders who are on the front lines of work and who are thinking about where we go from here. And as always, we're going to give you concrete ways that you can plug into this work and take action like we just did, because we don't learn how to be strategic to just have a better analysis than the other guys. We learn how to be strategic to put it into practice and to build our power. All right, y'all, let's get into this good learning. So for today's block and build political education session, as you might can tell, we're going to talk about power. We keep using that word. We know what powerlessness looks and feels like because we see that every day. And we know we can't just wish that their power over us will just go away on its own. So it's clear we need to build our own power. Tonight, we want to get specific about how we define power, why we need it, and what wielding power in the world of politics and elections actually looks like. As always, if you like these political education sessions, we'll give you information at the end about how you can access the recordings of all of the previous mass calls that we've done since April. and the downloadable slides and curriculum from all of the political education sessions. So stick around for that. But before we get into today's topic, we're going to, as per usual, take a moment, like we always do, to review some of the material that we've gone over on the past calls. We keep coming back to this particular slide because it's so important. When we all have a shared understanding of this, it makes it easier for us to coordinate and break down silos. And it helps us understand how my work connects with your work, even if we have different tactics. In this political crisis, the two major parties aren't serving us. The Republicans have been taken over by an authoritarian faction, and both major parties, yes, including the Democrats, are heavily controlled by corporate and ultra-wealthy forces. Working class people are stuck with a bad set of typically binary choices. Our task is to build a new majority and to pursue the power to govern. We also keep coming back to this guy, Stuart Hall. Stuart was one of the most influential political theorists in the game. This quote of his comes from a book that he wrote called The Long Road to Renewal. The book was called The Long Road to Renewal, which he wrote in the 1980s. He wrote it after the Labor Party had lost a historic election to the right wing and had lost support from many working class voters along the way. He helps us understand that politics is bigger than just elections. It's actually a long-term project of constructing majorities. We're going to come back to Stuart Hall later on, so remember this point. On past calls, we've done a deep dive on governing power. We offered this simple definition that governing power is about controlling the government. But we also talked about how it's not such a simple definition. If it's an ongoing process, right? And there are a lot of different things that go on under the hood there. We shared that governing power is at the very heart of the Working Families Party's power building model. That's what we're about. You can see that pictured here. So now that we've reviewed some of our previous political education sessions, we're going to dig deeper into the idea of power. We're going to look at the kinds of power we need to build and how politics and elections are one place where we can do that. To get us started with this discussion, I want to tell you a story. It's called The Last Stop Sign. The Last Stop Sign is actually the title of a short essay written in 1998 by this guy, Gary Delgado. Gary is a longtime community organizer. He got his start knocking on doors with Acorn. Many of you have heard of that organization, and if you're new to it, I'm sure you can Google it and find a lot, but basically it was a multiracial power building organization. Acorn was targeted and eventually broken by the right wing because of the power that they built, but many of the organizers from those days are still in the game. In the essay, Gary described his early days as an organizer in the 1970s. Back then, he described that it felt like he was organizing with the wind at his back. There were powerful social movements on the streets. In that time, organizing seemed to be working. But by the time he wrote the article in the late 1990s, it was a different political climate. Organizers at that point were facing stiff headwinds as the right wing was resurgent in the United States. The metaphor of a stop sign in Gary's essay was the idea that community organizers are taught to find small, winnable campaigns that matter to everyday lives of the people in that community. In this case, the idea is that the organizers are organizing their neighbors to get the city to install a stop sign at a dangerous intersection. We need more of this kind of organizing, y'all. This is the kind of back to basics work that we'll need to fight for the hearts and minds of working class people like our friends and neighbors. At the same time, Gary was offering a critique. He was not criticizing the idea of finding small, winnable fights, but he was identifying that there was a much bigger problem with the idea that these fights would all somehow add up to something bigger. The theory had been that we get people in a neighborhood organized to fight for the stop sign, and when they win that, they'll start to feel a sense of their power, something which had been robbed from them by decades of underinvestment and redlining and over-policing and all of the things. As the community sense of their power grew, we would take on bigger fights. We could form bigger organizations. Our neighborhood organization could grow into a citywide organization and eventually have real power on the really big stuff. To give credit where credit is due, this approach worked for a long time. Organizers like Gary and working class communities like the ones he was working in did start to win some big stuff. They started to take over cities. In fact, the right wing likes to attack the Working Families Party because the Working Families Party was founded 26 years ago by a coalition of progressive labor leaders and Acorn organizers in New York City. They attack because the party is winning and continues to win some really big stuff in New York City and in New York State. The problem was that the theory was also starting to break down by the time Gary wrote this essay. The right wing had perfected using culture wars to define the political debate. They were winning more and more power in both states and at the federal level. They were breaking apart the working class solidarity that had made the Democratic Party the home of organized labor and working people since the 1930s. And they were winning over more and more of those working class people to their politics. Gary ended his essay by calling for organizers to develop political vision. It's a short essay and he doesn't really get into what that means, but he was making it very clear that something needed to change in our organizing and power building strategies. Around the same time that Gary wrote that essay, an organization that I love called the Grassroots Power Project was coming into being. Many of you know them. Our homies at GPP introduced the idea that there are more dimensions to power than we may be aware of. We need to work on all these levels if we want to stop winning battles but losing the war. We'll go through each of these faces of power, and at the end, we'll tie it together to see how these different dimensions of power show up in our work of doing politics and elections. And y'all, we're probably going to spend some time over the next several calls breaking down each of those faces, but we're going to give an overview of it tonight so you know where we're going. The first face of power is all about organizing. Here, we're talking about the good old-fashioned organizing, the door knocking, the canvassing, some of which Gary described in his essay, going to where working class people live, where they work, where they worship, where they meet their friends, meeting people where they're at, and getting them involved in local fights. This is the most basic and important form of our power. Without this kind of power, we can't do much of anything else, y'all. The second face of power is a little less visible, but just as important. This is the power of building infrastructure. This might be easier to explain if I use an example. During the civil rights movement, you all know this, there were many different organizations that played different roles. They often had tensions with each other, but they still maintained functional unity. Let's walk through some of the organizations. There were large national organizations, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was organizing churches and preachers to join the movement. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which organized students both for direct action campaigns and to do grassroots organizing and voter education and registration work in Black communities across the South. Shout out to the SNCC Legacy Project and the continuation of that great work. The NAACP invested heavily in legal challenges, but many of their leaders also did direct action. The Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, was an interracial organization that engaged mainly in nonviolent direct action across the South. There were smaller organizations in the South as well, the Deacons for Defense that provided self-defense and protection to civil rights organizers. And y'all know, I have a particular affinity for the Highlander Folk School that trained activists in civil disobedience and helped to build the ties that bound together the civil rights movement and many movements. There were local organizations, the Montgomery Improvement Association and the Women's Political Council that organized the Montgomery bus boycott, or the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party that registered Black people to vote and then in turn challenged the National Democratic Party. There's so many more. And even just talking about these, there were organizations that were connected to those forces in society, like Black churches across the country, sections of the labor movement, sections of philanthropy, and even celebrities. The third face of power is even harder to see than the other two unless you're really looking for it. The third face is something we sometimes refer to as the battle of big ideas or ideology. Let's unpack that more. Remember this guy, this is Stuart Hall that you're going to see on this next slide. He gave us the idea that politics is actually the process of constructing majorities. Stuart spent time thinking about ideology. He wrote about the ways that ideas and images and other cultural reference points have influence over how we make sense of the world and what that means for our ability to construct majorities in politics. He talked about how people can look at the same thing and understand very different things. Now, I know for many of you, this is obvious, but it was pretty groundbreaking at the time. I think still remains pretty groundbreaking. It directly challenges the notion that just because someone grew up working class, that they would automatically vote in line with their working class interest. We sometimes ridicule this as people voting against their own self-interest. How many times have you heard it? I've heard it even ridiculous amounts of times, even in this electoral cycle. But we should have more curiosity than that. We should want to understand what power is making it so that working class people vote for a boss and a landlord like Donald Trump because he's able to appear more protective of the working class than the alternative. We should want to understand that because that's real power too. Every single person on the planet has a jumble of different ideas floating around in their heads at the same time. At election time, politicians are trying to get us, the voters, to make meaning of those ideas in a way that is advantageous to their cause. This word cloud has some of the ideas and images that were floating around in this most recent election. You'll likely have an instant reaction to many of them. They will bring up whole frames of reference for you. They will tap into collective experience and shared histories. But as we know, the meaning I assign to a word may not be the same as the meaning someone else assigns to it. Whether you love him or hate him, we have to acknowledge that Donald Trump possesses an instinctive, almost primitive understanding of how power works on this level. He taps into people's grievances. He mobilizes their resentment. He gives them clear people and things to blame for their problems and false promises to fix those problems. So as we wrap, let's look at how all of this stuff ties together in politics and in elections. Remember, politics is more than just elections. In politics, we build our base year round. And then in elections, we have to rigorously count up and deliver our base. In politics, we have to weave together the shared self-interest of many different organizations and voting blocks. And then in elections, we have to mobilize this infrastructure as part of a winning voter coalition. In politics, we have to fight the battle of big ideas and not sit there thinking that this ideological stuff is too in the clouds or too complex for regular people to understand. People do understand it. But if the only folks talking to them on this level are people like Trump, we are already losing. In elections, when millions and millions of people are listening, we have to insert our narrative and our worldview into the public debate. Now, if you like these political education sessions, and we've been doing them on the call since April, we're posting the recordings on the WFP website at www.workingfamilies.org/mass calls. We'll make sure that you get that in the chat. And we've also put downloadable versions of all of the slides and all of my speakers' notes for these political education sessions right there on the website. So you can find them there and you can download them and you can use them in your own work with your own communities. Again, you can find it at www.workingfamilies.org/mass calls. The moral of the story, the more we do to build power, specifically working class power, the closer we get to governing in alignment with our values. We need you today to make that vision, that hope, that power a reality. So again, if you haven't texted mass calls to 30403, I need you to do it. I need you to do it, and I need you to RSVP for the upcoming mass calls. I think the next one is December 10th. And then I need you to take action. I need you to join WFP. I need you to become a wolf pack leader or join a wolf pack near you to help build the party that we've always deserved, the party of our dreams. I need you to go and check out the recordings from the previous calls, check out the political education and download those materials and use them by going to workingfamilies.org/mass calls. I need you to share all of this information with your friends and get 5 more people to sign up for the mass calls. And I want to remind you that you can go to weareworthfightingfor.com and either sign up to host a community gathering, or you can sign up to attend a community gathering. Now, you've heard me talking for way too long, so I want to bring in 2 incredible humans who I respect and love dearly. I get to introduce to some and bring back for others to see. The incredible Philadelphia City Council member, Nicholas O'Rourke, is in the building, you all. And then I also get to introduce to some and bring to others our beloved OG, Makani Timba, who I'm going to say a bunch of really glorious things about when it's her turn to answer my questions. So I want y'all to go in the chat and show some love to Council Member O'Rourke, and I want you to show some love to Makani Timba as they come. Show some love, good people. I see you in the chats. I see you in the chats. I love the hearts. Thank you, Kim. I see the shout outs from Lucas. I see you. Show some love to Nick O'Rourke, our Philadelphia City Council member, and Makani Timba. Nick, what is good, comrade? Thank you for being here.
Hey,
Uh,
I'm peacock proud and honeymoon happy to be on here with the good peoples of the Working Families Party. It's a good
You know
time.
we love you. And let me tell y'all, if y'all missed the IG lives that we did on election day, one of the most lit ones that we did was with Kendra Jackson and Nick O'Rourke and Mo Mitchell. You should see it. It was amazing. So, Nick, I want to start with you. We've got some new folks on the call and we have some veterans here. And not everyone's going to know your story and the story of how you and Kendra became the first third party members of Philadelphia City Council in generations. So I want you to just take a second and like talk to us from your heart about how you have been literally an embodiment of a model for building power in Philadelphia.
So, first of all, Ash, thank you so much for having me on the call and grateful to be on here with so many folks watching and collaborating on how we can build real power to realize the party and really the society of our dreams. As has been said, my name is Nicholas O'Rourke. I'm a member at large of Philadelphia City Council and happen to be the minority whip. And the reason why I can, as a member who's a whopping 10 months into the gig, 11 months into the gig, can be called a minority whip is because both myself as well as Leader Brooks were able to secure the 2 seats on Philadelphia City Council that were reserved by law for a minority party, meaning of the 17 seats on City Council, there is a home rule charter that reserved of those 7 at-large seats, 2 of them for a minority party. Philadelphia, for most folks that may not know, is a Democrat Party machine town. So when you think about Chicago, New York, other places, Philadelphia is right in that lick. In fact, one of the older ones, in that you have the machinery of the ward system and the party or what have you. And so for upwards of 90 years, really there had only been Democrats and those 2 seats defaulting to Republicans because there was no other minority party that was able to contend for those 2 seats. In 2019, both myself and Leader Brooks, now Leader Brooks, but at the time just organizer Kendra, Nikki from Nicetown, as they say, put together a little a campaign with the great assistance and leadership of the Working Families Party to campaign for those 2 seats. You know, in the community and in movement, we would say whose streets? Our streets. For 2019, the question was whose seats? Our seats. We didn't want to leave power on the table. We wanted to contend for that power so that we can win material gains for the working class and working poor. Kendra Brooks did win that election. I came just shy, but as you said earlier, politics is not some election cycle kind of situation. It's a long-term project of building majorities. We continue to contend for those and build the power that we needed to outside of the halls of city power, knowing that all the major changes happen not in the halls but on the heels of people movements. We were able to help that happen. Leader Brooks stayed in movement even as she was working from the inside, and then we mounted another campaign, one for her reelection, and me running again. And in November of last year, we saw success to that end. It is super important to name that this did not happen exclusively by the WFP alone, although all of our people are incredible staff and brilliant peoples. It's recognizing what we in WFP know, that our power is not in the pointed finger, it's in the clutched fist. It's not in the single grape, it's in the cluster. When we pull together as a community, as we pull together as a movement, we build out those majorities and those coalitions on an ongoing basis. We have a whole lot more power than the moneyed interests that are there. It really is true that the power of the people is stronger and greater than the people in power. And so we've seen that materialize in a real way. Since then, we've been able to actually work to implement policy that is going to help materially and measurably improve the lives of working people. Namely, some of the work that Leader Brooks has done. Obviously, she got elected in 2019, and within short order, she was locked down just like the rest of us and trying to govern for the first time as a freshman in the midst of a global pandemic. Well, she said, hey, as we were all talking about how we're going to keep folks safe and keep shelter overhead, food in bellies, keep folks healthy, how do we address the desire by landlords and all those to push people out of their shelter, out of their homes? But she was able to advocate for an eviction diversion program that was passed at that time and was able to make permanent in this second term. We are now able to say that we are a city that has been able to address that issue in a material way. Since I've come on, I've been able to put together a great team. I'm so honored to have the staff that we have in the councilmanic office of Nicholas O'Rourke, as we've been working really hard and figuring out how we as an at-large office can address the material concerns of folks as it relates to housing. Some people may know that as we progress in society, we are seeing the advance of technology, and we are seeing the kind of the invisible hand of the algorithm shaping reality as we know it. And so, while our systems are a bit archaic, technology is outpacing us, 4-1. And so it's not just shaping your timeline and what you're seeing on social media. It's also shaping the prices by which you pay to be able to find housing. So here in the city of Philadelphia, one of the things that we did following after the suit of San Francisco, and I know that we have some WFP electeds out there on the council there, we were able to ban algorithmic rental price fixing. I got to say it slow because it's a whole mouthful to kind of get out there. We banned algorithmic rental price fixing. This is something that we were able to have come before the council, go into committee, come out of committee with a favorable recommendation, and to get a supermajority so that it would be veto proof when it goes to the mayor's desk. It has been signed, and we are looking forward to holding all of those corporations accountable that are using these algorithms to price gouge and to place prices high in what people know as Philadelphia being the poorest big city in the USA, not because the city itself is poor, but because the city makes the people poor by the extraction of wealth. And so we are so honored to be able to do something that's going to, we believe, lift in the suffering and the challenges that it is that working people, working class, working poor folks deal with every single day. This is the kind of stuff that you can accomplish when you continue to build those majorities, when you continue to work with community to not just talk good game. That's important. We got to have a great analysis, but at some point you got to leave the book club and get into the halls of power so we can make policy that change people's lives. And that's what we've been able to accomplish, and we look forward to doing more in that vein over the next 3 years in the course of this term.
Absolutely. I mean, so many lessons to pull from both what you've shared, Nick, what Councilwoman what Kendra Brooks has been telling us for multiple calls and multiple live streams with WFP is like, there was base building work that happened. There was political education work that happened. There was actually mobilizing to the polls that happened. And then there was taking the people's demands and turning it into progressive policies that only our champions could have gotten through. So we had it sounds like what we had was a multi-tactical coalition strategy that built our power. And now we're passing laws that are actually going to change the material conditions of everyday working class people in Philadelphia. And that is the lesson, good people. I want you to show some more love to Nicholas O'Rourke, Philadelphia City Councilman, a WFP champion. We love you. Makani, I'm coming to you. So, I mean, again, I think we got, even for the new people, I'm sure that y'all know Makani Timba. It's because she's an incredible organizer. She is a brilliant strategist. She's arguably one of the best facilitators I've ever known. For many of us in movement, she's the OG. She helps us like just keep our wits about us to think strategically and intentionally about how to build power. And when I was thinking about like, who are the folks that have been for decades telling us that there was gonna be a consequence to us not having a real understanding of power, not having real conversations about what it takes to build it? It's you, Makani Timba. And on top of all that, if that wasn't enough, she's also an incredible narrative builder, y'all. So I have 1,000 questions for you, Makani, but you're a movement OG. One of my and movement's guiding lights in all things in life, love, and power building. You are all of those things and more that I mentioned in your intro. Tell me what you're seeing in the fallout since November 5th, and tell us what we should be focusing on, what we should be doing and saying in this season. And then I probably have another question for you that's also about like, how do we move beyond the noise and chaos and confusion of this moment and build narrative power, build strategic organizing power to reach our folks so that we can actually then execute and wield our power. And maybe I lied. I have a third question for you that's also like, and what are you seeing in this moment that are like blowbacks to the ways that we've already used our power? And what should we be knowing and preparing for because of that?
Wow.
All the questions. Answer all the
questions. Also, all the love. Thank you. That was a very generous, loving, intro. And hey, fam, I wish I could see the chat, but just know that I love y'all and hello and all the good things. So let's start with what happened. And I really, there's a part of me that says, let's not even talk about November 5th in a way, because, you know, the metaphor that I've been using over these last few years is that I feel like we've been like the white girl in the horror movie. And so like you're watching a movie and you're like, girl, don't go in there. And then the chainsaw's going, and and if you like, and and you're still going. And then there's a part where you fall down and you're like, run, girl, run. And and so you're like, okay, you already know what this movie's gonna be. But still, you open the door. Still, you don't run. Still, you're out in the country in the dark in high heels, wondering, why you didn't get away. Like, like there's a part of this story, but also there's a part of this story that's about the intentional work that they have done for years. And that's what I mean by watching a horror movie. You know, they came for immigrants back in the 90s, started, voter ID. And, how many of us really stood up and fought and understood that was not a good move? Some of us, but a lot of us didn't, right? We did a teeny bit better on returning residents' right to vote, but not that much. So there's parts where we had an opportunity to be in solidarity to make sure that our people could vote. That would have made a difference. But let's just say that's what it is. But the other thing we're dealing with is just because we don't really understand power on so many levels. Like there's three faces, but there's also like dimensions and levels. And I think one of the things about living in Mississippi is that I am constantly reminded that people like Fannie Lou Hamer, they did what they did with not one vote in one house. Not one. We complain about having a minority, but not a single one. Because those people, our ancestors understood all the forms of power available to them. And we are in a moment where we have got to understand all the forms. So some of that is even spiritual and ancestral, right? Which more of us are leaning into. Some of it is about storytelling. Some of it is about what do we block? Because what we learn in Mississippi all the time is if we don't cost these people money, they don't care. So then what does that mean in terms of how we build power with some possible potential corporate allies? In terms of, so we have to be creative like our people, or we have to look back. There was a time when folks said the Redskins were never going to change their name in Washington. And then our indigenous brothers and sisters with some allies went to FedEx and said, guess what? So the thing is that we have all these levers if we're strategic. And as organizers, we are accountable to our people to be strategic. We can't keep playing. We can't keep acting like, and don't get me wrong, I love marches. Marches, I'm a preacher's kid. I like church, all the ways they come. I have no problem with that. And a preacher's grandkid. Let's do that. But let's understand it in the context. We build people's hope and energy and camaraderie to then move them into work together. We build our organizations and build our infrastructure so they can hold the work in a particular kind of way, right? We take over institutions of service like our schools and our hospitals and things like that, those lessons, right, from our people who came before us. And we are also institution builders, because being able to deliver governing power isn't just being in office. It's very important, but governing power is controlling the services that people need. And what we saw over the years is them peeling our people away. Again, watching it like it was a horror movie, or watching it like the white girl in the horror movie, when our cousins and our nephews were sending us that crazy ish, and we were like, Lord have mercy, and we're trying to talk to them. But did we as a movement really think about got to go in, we got to take our house back. We got to talk to our people in a different way. So now we have this opportunity. It's never too late. So we have this opportunity to really talk to our people, to really think about culture, to really think about what does it mean to deliver services, especially in places like where many of us live, where we're mutual aid. We act like it's something we got to do by accident, but let's just get real. That's governing power, right? How do we help people have hope? How do we support them in their mental health? How do we build peer networks? All of that, right? And here's the other part, that you need a few things to have democracy. And voting is the least of it. And electing people is actually the least of it. You need to have a good education system so people can actually process and understand the information. And they have decimated that. And, one of the things that I noticed, I am the oldest of 9, so I have a gang of nieces and nephews. And so they are like, they were texting me like, Auntie, I got this thing about picking cotton, right? Which, a lot of people, and I'm thinking, y'all went to college. Y'all don't remember that there's not that much cotton in America right now? Like, why are you thinking this is real? But this is where we are, where it's like the critical thinking skills, the popular education work. You think of, like that Highlander held down and other folks. It's like all of that is the infrastructure, which means what's great about it is everybody got something to do. If your job is to make pound cake while somebody else does a thing, bring the pound cake, right? If your job is to draw pictures that help people see a thing, there's a lot of work to do, but also I want us to have this broader vision of how we help our people have critical thinking skills, educate, how we make sure they have good information, and we're in there, battling with the media, but also creating our own media and also challenging the media, because that work has fallen to the wayside too. Doing the challenging, like that's a lie, that's not true, all of those things, in addition to the other kind of building and social fabric. Because the other big ingredient to democracy that people forget about is that something that I call nationhood. But what I mean by that is it just means that connection, And what Trump does and the right wing does, they create that all the time. And part of how they create it, obviously, is like be scared of them people, right? But we also it's hard to govern if you don't believe that the people you're in it with are you. And so we have to constantly, through our faith communities and other places, we have to weave together this culture of beyond belonging, but the fact that we are interconnected, that we are the people, we are right there. So there's more. You just got to come to my house and kick it.
Listen, if you invite I don't even know how many people are on this call right now, and certainly the thousands that are going to watch it to come to Jackson, do not threaten us with a good time at Connie Temple. We will show up. We will show up. And that actually might be the call to action because, Antar Lumumba is our homie and we will show up when he calls.
And we need y'all.
Yeah. Yeah, we got y'all. Angela Rye was on last week's call talking about that very thing. Shout out to Antar. Shout out to Andrew Gillum. Like, we see y'all. We love y'all. Marilyn Mosby, others. We know what's up, and we're not gonna let them lie on my people. That's not gonna happen. We'll talk about that more on future calls too, y'all. There's so many more questions. I mean, like, people want to know how to connect to y'all. Both of them stay on social media, y'all. So like, just go on IG, go on Facebook, you'll find them. But we will make sure that you have ways to connect with them and the organizations that they throw down with, all of the speakers from all of the mass calls on that Working Families page that we keep dropping in the chat. And I'll give you another run of those in a minute. But before we shift, I know y'all can't see the chat, but they've been live. They've been lit in the chat. I keep the Zoom on my phone during the mass call so I can see the chat. And when I tell you they have been responding, you got a whole bunch of yes girls, Nick. You got a whole bunch of love because Pennsylvania folks stay on the mass calls, so they be knowing y'all coming. They roll like a crew in the chat. So your people are claiming you, my brother, blessing you and sending you so much love. We had some of the sister girls that be on the mass calls be like, yeah, man, we got to go talk to our folks. That happened during your section, Makani. People are thanking you and talking about how much they're learning, and talking about how awesome y'all are. So thank you for not regarding it robbery to be with us tonight. We love you. Take one more minute, y'all, to show some love in the chat and through your reactions to Makani and to Councilman O'Rourke. I see you, Rich, saying Philly is loyal. That was the word to you. Love y'all so much. Thank you for being here.
Philly.
Philly is showing out in the chat. I see y'all.
That's what we do.
We love you, Nick. Sending love,
you.
Makani, to you and your incredible work, and
Love
to all
y'all.
and Jackson. We're gonna have y'all back because there's so much more to talk about, but we gotta close this call before the sun comes up. So again, I'm going to give y'all one more minute to just show some love to these incredible speakers. Thank y'all so much for being here. Folks, we are going to wrap up, but y'all know, I know people are like, don't stop the call. And I would love to do that, but people, y'all need to sleep too. We got to sleep too. So I promise you, we got another call scheduled. You RSVP for it. We're going to do this again, but for folks that are new to the call, folks that have been on the calls know this, but folks that are new to the call, usually at this point of the call, I get to brag about an incredible human that I get to love, who also is my party leader. Usually we wrap up with some sort of sermonette from our beloved party leader, the national director of the Working Families Party, Maurice Mitchell. But tonight, Mo's on a plane. We thought we had him, but we got the wires crossed. It's probably my fault, and Mo is in transit. Despite his busyness, he still has a message for all of you tonight. And I have the privilege of articulating it to you. So I'm going to share it with you now. So now I want you to close your eyes and picture Mo, but hear my voice as Mo Mitchell. So now I'm quoting him. Here we go. Family, I won't sugarcoat this. The stakes couldn't be higher. We've seen the outlines of what's to come, and we know the challenges we face with Trump's return to the White House. His administration is poised to attack our people, undermine progress, and empower corporate greed at the expense of working families. But this is not just a time for despair, it's a moment for resilience. As you've heard on the call tonight, history shows us that power does not simply disappear. It must be built and wielded with love and determination. The Working Families Party exists to organize, protect, and create systems of care and resilience in our communities. Together, we've unpacked the lessons of power and the necessity of creating a multiracial, feminist, working class movement. The question now is, how will you act? We refuse to be mobilized by fear or surprise. We see what's coming, and we are ready to respond with clarity and purpose. Tonight, we've explored how relational organizing, grassroots action, and collective care are our greatest strengths. Now, we ask you to take your place in this movement by taking one or more of the following powerful actions. Number one, you can text CONNECT, the word CONNECT, CONNECT, to 30403 and connect with local or national organizers and find your best fit to contribute to this movement. You can join the Working Families Party Slack community by texting SLACK, SLACK, to 30403. You'll join a community of WFP members and share resources and take local actions. You can step into your leadership. You can RSVP for the Wolfpack Leader Orientation at wfpus.org/Wolfpack. If you do that, you can start or join a pack to organize hyper-local teams that are going to build resilience and fight back. You can invite others in. You can share this movement with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers, with your neighbors. You can encourage them to join the next mass call and to take action with you. Each of these steps strengthens our collective power and brings us closer to a future where we govern for all of us. We've heard tonight about the lessons of history and about the urgency of the moment. Leaders like you will chart a path forward. Together, we will resist reckless abuse of power, and we're going to construct a new majority capable of governing with purpose and love. So, what role will you play? Will you organize your community? Will you recruit others to stand with us? Will you help us lead the way? The threats we face are real, but so is our collective power, y'all. Let this be the turning point where we refuse to be divided, where we organize to protect each other, where we strengthen our resolve to build the party working people across the country deserve. Text CONNECT, the word CONNECT, CONNECT, to 30403. Sign up for a wolf pack. Organize your community, protect one another. Together we are unstoppable. Onward, family. Can we just take a second to show some love to Maurice Mitchell for sharing these words despite how incredibly busy it is, and for the team that supports Mo that makes these words possible. Just take a second to also wish him safe travel on his journey. For those of you that are coming to the Facing Race conference, he will be speaking there. Make sure we show him some love and, keep our leaders lifted. So that was a word from our beloved brother, Maurice Mitchell. Let's get ready to close by celebrating even more of the leadership that made this call possible. Show some love for the incredible team who has guided us tonight, on point, folks that do political education work at WFP, the folks that are organizing and building tech. We love y'all. Thank y'all for guiding us tonight, bringing us hope, grounding us, inspiring us to take bold action. That is what this party is about. That's what the organizations that throw down with this party are about. This is how we move forward together, stronger than ever. That is our opportunity. Again, I want to invite you to text mass call to 30403 to stay on top of the mass calls and the calls to action that come from our partners here. Join the Working Families Party. So many of you joined last week, and we're so grateful that you're with us. Many of you signed up to be dues paying members. If you haven't done that, you can do that tonight as well. Become a Wolfpack leader or join a Wolfpack near you, as our brother Mo invited. Access all of the recordings and materials from the past mass calls at workingfamilies.org/mass calls, and share this info with your friends. Ask them to get involved. Ask them to text mass call to 30403. All right, y'all, we're about 3 minutes up, so let me get us to a close. We've come to an end of another powerful evening together. I want to thank again our incredible speakers, Nick O'Rourke and Makani Themba. Thank you all for being here. And thanks to each and every single one of you who did not regard it robbery to spend this evening with us. By coming together on these calls, we're taking steps to build the power that we need and prepare for the ways our enemies will try to wield their power over us. There is no doubt that we are entering into a dark time. Some of us have been in a dark time. And at the same time, it's no darker and no worse than dark times that we have faced before. They're different. In all those periods of struggle, there were leaders who kept their feet on the ground and their eyes on the North Star. We're not waiting for those leaders, because we, in fact, dear ones, are those leaders. It's us. We will feel our feelings. We will lean into our community. We will build strong organizations. We will provide support and guidance to those around us. We will not check out, because to do so makes their power over us complete. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. And remember, our next mass call is December 10th at 8 p.m. Eastern. Check the mobilized link to RSVP for mass calls that we've added to the calendar to be prepared to make meaning of what's happening together post-election. I'm sending each and every one of you love and gratitude. Every single one of you, I feel the deepest love in my heart for you. I respect you. I want you to be free. Together, we will get through this. Be well, good people. Until next time.